Hello, Jules.
Hey Tam, how are you?
I'm I'm so wonderful, thank you, and I'm ecstatic that I'm going to be chatting to you a little bit about your farm, where I can see you're sitting right now, where you're going to be retiring to in just a short end of the year's time.
Yep.
And as everyone who's joining us would have seen, Julian is a dear friend of mine. And for almost most of the time that I've known him, I didn't realize, and maybe he didn't even realize, that he is part of the F.I.R.E movement. If you're just watching, if you didn't watch my first episode, F.I.R.E stands for Financially Independent Retire Early. But obviously, something in Julian's life made him realize that he didn't want to be trading his time for money forever. So that's kind of how I want to kick off, Jules. We know that you're sitting on your beautiful farm, but I'm sure your story started long before that. I'm curious, how did you kind of get the know-how to realize that you needed to start investing in your life?
It was Robert Kiyosaki with his book Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I read that, and it was without a doubt the most influential book I've ever read in my entire life. And he's obviously a big guru. I suppose the whole fire movement. And I read his book, and it started me thinking. Before I read his book, I was heavily in debt. I had difficulty paying my bills. I couldn't make ends meet, and literally 5 or 6 years later, I had two or three properties, and I was planning for the future and buying more properties and looking at retiring early.
Wow. Well, how old were you when you came across that book?
I must have been my early 30s, probably 32, 30, 32. So 15 years ago.
Fantastic. So, I mean, for people who are watching are thinking, oh my goodness, if I didn't start investing or saving when I was 18, it's like a lost cause. In your 30s and your 40s, even if you're in your 50s, it's worth starting straight away and realizing that the nobody actually saves themselves or earns themselves to being financially independent. It's about realizing that you can create assets for yourself. That's probably the gist of the book, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's creating assets that it's about taking your income and using that to buy assets, and then having those assets provide a revenue that you then live off. So
Absolutely.
you're not reliant on your salary. You're reliant on your investments.
And I think a lot of people imagine that's really only for people who are born into kind of a wealthy family, or who've got some kind of clever financial people in their family, maybe taught by their parents or taught by some kind of like investing aunt or something like that. Is that necessary?
No, not at all. I mean, it's great if you can inherit a lot of money, but that really doesn't happen. It doesn't happen to me. And it's really just about making a plan and realizing that you can do it, and that you can put aside some of your money to invest in something that you believe strongly in, so that it can provide for you in the future, not be reliant on a corporation to pay your salary and pay your way. They don't have your best interests at heart. You have to have your own best interests at heart.
Yes, well, that's kind of the next question I wanted to ask you is, never mind if they've got your best interests at heart. Why did you want to leave corporate life? I know that it's lined up for the end of the year for you. If someone's watching and thinking like that feels impossible, you're just sort of bound to having a job for the rest of your life. What are the reasons that you want to leave?
Well, first of all, if you believe it's impossible, it will be impossible. And I had to have a life changing event to have a life changing event. And what there was, I was hit by a car when I was cycling one day, training for the Argus, and
Sure.
I ended up having spinal surgery, and I had to lie down. It was a simple operation, but I had to lie down for 6 months. I couldn't sit down, and staring at the ceiling for 6 months gave me a chance to think about what I wanted to do with my life, and that was the start. That was the start of the journey. Do I really want to be sitting behind a desk, making money for someone else for the rest of my life, or do I want to find something that I'm truly passionate about, and then follow my dreams?
Absolutely, and I guess that leads us on to the idea of how it is you came about knowing that you wanted to buy your farm. it was more, I mean, obviously I remember when you had your surgery, and it wasn't much long after that that you ended up buying Underhill. So is that sort of how that came about for you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I realized that my passion was building. Everyone has a different passion, and I'm not urging people to go into the building trade, but I am urging people to follow their passion, because that's where that's what will drive you. Because it's incredibly hard doing your own thing. It's incredibly long hours. You're going to have to be able to learn how to do everything yourself. And if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to have the strength to continue. And I realized that my passion was building and renovations, and I realized I had an opportunity to go buy a farm and build some magnificent cottages, what I hoped would be some magnificent cottages on it, and rent them out and bring in some revenue that would then pay the bills and enable me to live on the farm full time, and continue with building and woodworking and making cider and all those things that I often thought about would be really cool to do, but I never thought I'd have a chance to actually make it happen.
Yeah, because even already you spend half of your time almost on the farm. It's not like
I still
and
have a job, and I work in part of the week in town and the rest of the time on the farm, and yeah, trying to make my dream making my dream a reality.
your dream is a reality. There's something unique about Underhill Farm though, and we'll put a link in the comments for anybody who wants to come and check it out, because as a guest cottage, is you've built the cottages in a very unique way. They're not just any old cottages. The farm's got a bit of an ethos. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's about recycling, reusing, recycling, upcycling, reducing our impact on the planet, reusing everything that you can. I haven't bought a single door or window new on the farm. I get all of my bricks from a local brick manufacturer. The wood comes from nearby in Somerset West, and any way that I can reduce my impact on the planet, I want to do that. And there's really two reasons for doing that. The first is it's cheaper. Um, and if you want to retire, and that is a word I use a lot now, is I don't have a lot of money, I'm poor, and I'm looking for cheap ways of doing things. And I know people tell me that's wrong, but if I wanted to build a traditional cottage, it would cost me 300,000 to 600,000 rand. I'd have to get a bond. I'd have to pay it off over 20 years. Hopefully, the rental from the cottage would pay for most of that bond, but it would leave me very little, and I'd still be linked into the banks for the next 20 years. And I wanted to find a way to break that chain. And I wanted to find a way not only to break the chain of working for a corporate, but break the chain of owing money to a bank.
Yeah, and I mean, again, so this is another element of the FIRE movement. Jules and I were chatting just a little bit before we went live, and I was like, "Do you know you're actually a part of the FIRE movement?" He's like, "No, never heard of it." But the reality is, the FIRE movement is basically this idea that you can decide when enough is enough. How much do you need to live, and what do you actually need to be happy? And once you decide what your values are, Jules cares about building and upcycling and recycling and making cider on his farm. And when you truly appreciate that that's what fulfills you, you don't have to go chasing these kind of big dreams and big mortgages, and you can determine what your monthly living requirement is and then adjust other things in your life to be able to fit that. And that's truly what the FIRE movement is about. And the idea of living a simpler life in order to be able to have more free time is one of the key ingredients, which is why you're actually an ambassador for this movement. And what I would recommend is anybody who's watching this, if you're based in South Africa, or even if you're not based in South Africa, is that you can go and have a look at some of the cottages. They've got different themes. I've stayed in one of the latest ones, which was called Hobbit Hollow. So some of them are done in kind of beautiful sort of Lord of the Rings themes, and they are just what you would need. So part of your message is that you don't have to have this sprawling house. You can actually live really happily with you don't have to kind of sacrifice anything, but you don't have to be excessive.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the process of actually building a cottage for myself that I'm going to live in. I got a brickie to do the putting the bricks on top of one another, but I've done the roof myself. I went and cut down trees from alien invaders, black wattles from the riverbank that I've used for the roof, and I've put the roof on myself. The total cottage size is going to be about 26 square meters, and that is what I'm going to live in. And I'm going to live in a place that's 26 square meters. It's about what 250 feet, and it's more than I need. And the reward that I get from building something from scratch with my bare hands that I'm going to live in for the rest of my life is far more rewarding than going out and buying a Mac mansion with several bedrooms and all those mod cons that people think are absolutely essential to them. And I can just live simply, and instead of looking inwards and the mod cons that I have inside, I look at the nature that I have outside, and I feel that my house has actually increased tremendously inside to incorporate the nearby hillsides, the riverbanks, the forests, the nature, growing things myself. And it's just far more rewarding than just living in an enormous house and driving a very expensive motor vehicle.
Yes, I mean, I obviously Warwick, Max, and I have stayed at Underhill Farm plenty of times. And while I was thinking about having this chat with you tonight, I kind of got a little bit sad. It's such a tranquil lifestyle, and as you say, the surroundings are actually what makes the experience. So it's a beautiful thing that you've created there.
Well, it is nature, and I did not, and I also had to and the big thing was I used to be a very big corporate employee at a big corporate bank, and I drove the fancy Mercedes convertible, and I smoked the cigars and drank the champagne, and I went on the overseas holidays, and I felt I had the perfect life, but I was unfulfilled, and I was heavily in debt, and I was focused on the next gadget and the next consumer item, as opposed to being focused on nature and the planet and world around us. And it took me a very long time to change that. I had to, first of all, I stopped TV. I cancelled my DSTV subscription. I stopped buying newspapers and magazines. I started
Mm-hmm.
watching inspirational documentaries and programs about people living in tiny houses and people living in forests. And I had to really, it took me a very long time to retrain myself. But I did it because that's what I realized I wanted to do.
Absolutely. And I feel like I've been on quite a similar journey. I also kind of remember discovering the idea of upcycling and tiny houses through sort of observing you when you still lived in Cape Town in a big house, sort of how you started Airbnb-ing it and then looking at the farm and then getting into upcycling. I know there were a lot of people who thought maybe you'd lost your marbles a bit when you told them you were going out to live in a farm. And isn't it amazing how after just a few short years, the level of life satisfaction is so much more than what it was when we were all just following this kind of script that actually didn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, it comes down to the passion. Once again, I'm not saying to everyone that they should try, they should sell up their house and go live in the country. There's lots of
Mm-hmm.
ways to be able to become financially independent living in the city. In
Sure.
fact, I think a lot of millennials are a lot more successful at this than I am because they haven't been indoctrinated into the whole corporate commercial cycle. They're picking up in a way, possibly even intuitively, that there are better ways to do things than just sitting behind a desk and sitting in traffic and sitting in an expensive apartment. And they are going and
Yeah.
exploring the world and working from wherever they can and blogging or building things or having their own interests that are creating their own independence.
Yeah.
But you can also change your life and do it. But the important thing is to have a passion, know what that passion is, and follow it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said something quite important that it was a process of unlayering and educating for yourself. Is there any kind of major starting point piece of advice you would give to anyone who's watching this and thinking, holy shit, that sounds like exactly the kind of shift I would want to make in my life, but where would I start?
Well, find out what your passion is. If it's building something, or if it's designing something, or if it's going somewhere, or if it's doing something, whatever that is, see what your passion is, and then look at how you can make money out of it. Everything's on Google. There's nothing that I've learned on my journey that I haven't at some point or another read somewhere on Google. It's all there. It's all out there. Find your passion, and Google how you can make it a reality.
Great. That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Jules.
Cool.
We'll say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for
Bye,
joining
everyone.
us.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.